It is almost 7:16, like the normal time we do this.
Yep, it is.
Sam Siemens here at mic number 2 this morning.
Good morning.
Bet we get a good price on a motel room in Baltimore.
Yeah. An all-expense paid trip to the city of Baltimore.
And an unprecedented move by Major League Baseball. You know, we're still in the early parts of the season. You know,
Yeah.
April is kind of like get your feet wet
Right.
type of thing, and let's see which way we're going to head this thing off.
Yeah.
Well, the White Sox, Chicago White Sox, were the visiting team at Baltimore, and 2 games have been canceled or postponed. They're going to play them in May on an open date.
Yeah.
Probably have to schedule a doubleheader. But in an unprecedented move by Major League Baseball, the White Sox will play at Camden Yards at Oriole Park. Public not allowed.
Right. Yeah, I understand.
Public
but you know,
allowed.
how do you have a Major League Baseball game in the middle of a riot? I mean, you know, did you see what happened last night when they tried to, when the curfew went into force at 10 p.m.? The protesters were standing across the street looking at the cops. I mean, they weren't going to observe that. And so I think Major League Baseball doesn't want the lawsuit or the responsibility, the liability of having their fans come out. Could you imagine if the rioters went to the baseball stadium? What a powder keg that would be.
They had got down to Camden Yards.
All those people contained in a stadium, my gosh, what a nightmare that would be.
I think it's a smart move by MLB.
Yeah, I think they have to.
They've got to get all the games in.
Yeah.
Because, you know, this early in the season, anything can affect the outcome.
Will it be televised? Will they televise it instead?
I have a feeling they will go ahead and put it on TV if it was scheduled for one of the sports networks.
Somebody hits a home run, nobody to cheer. That'd be weird, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would.
Yeah, well, just running the bases with
I
nobody.
bet the audio guys are making a lot of ambient noise.
Get the canned applause going. Yeah, it's a mess down there, and you can thank their leadership for it, if you ask me.
And speaking of leadership,
or lack thereof.
the lack thereof. We've seen it in Ferguson.
Yeah.
We saw the disrespect for the police in New York when the 2 were just basically assassinated while on unit patrol out on the street. You know, just getting down in cold blood. I'm just going to say it, folks. We voted in this leadership.
Yeah. Well, I think the time for politically correct couched speech is just over. I mean, we need to call things what they are and let the chips fall where they may. Now, you may run the risk of being deemed a racist or a bigot or what have you, just like we see with the bakers and the gay cake thing. You know, if you disagree, you hate, which is of course not true. That's a false narrative, and I just refuse to be couched like that. You know, how about we tell the truth and let the chips fall where they may, and go back to personal responsibility instead of party or race or, gender, just being responsible for your actions.
If you don't want to get involved with anything with the police, don't break the law.
Yeah, that's a good rule, huh? I mean, you look at all the, even in cases where the police have acted inappropriately or even illegally, and yes, we know that does happen, a lot of those folks were in that position. What are you doing at 2 in the morning running from the police? Why are you there? I mean, unless you have a job out in the city, most people at 2 a.m. are in bed. Yeah. So a lot of these people got put into these positions, and then, and in a very, very few, the minority of the circumstances where the police didn't act properly.
And the young man that died in police custody.
Yeah. Well, the rest of the story's coming out now, isn't it?
He had a rap sheet from here to your car.
Well, have you seen what's ablaze on social media this morning in regards to that guy?
Haven't seen it yet.
Yeah. You know why he died in custody? Now that's what's being said. A week and a half ago, he had cervical and spinal surgery. He was supposed to be at home in bed, not on a bicycle, not running from the police. That man had cervical spinal surgery.
So he injured himself.
Yeah, his spine was already injured before the police chased him and took him down. He had a switchblade in his pocket, which is illegal. Nobody seems to care about that. And like you said, a rap sheet a mile long. Now, that doesn't mean just because of his past that he was guilty that day. But now more of the facts are coming out. If you're going to run from the police, you're going to be tackled or tased or what have you. And if you've already got screws in your spine, guess what? Maybe it's a good idea for you not to be riding a bicycle out in one of the worst neighborhoods of the city running from the cops. Does anybody ever think of that?
Duh.
I mean, it's how do you not put that together? I just don't understand.
I can't fathom some of this.
And then not only that, but then the uninformed response for this thing has just been absolutely abysmal. The leadership of this mayor has nothing to do with her color, her gender. I don't care if it's a woman,
African American woman.
I would still vote for Condoleezza Rice for president right now today. That's a black female. Wouldn't bother me a bit. It has to do with the individuals, their capability, their record, how they govern. That's the problem I have with the Baltimore mayor.
Well, listen how she handled it. I've got this audio clip that I just unloaded, and you can just type in Baltimore mayor destroy. And here's what she has to say about the rioters.
Okay.
And I've made it very clear that I worked with the police and instructed them to do everything that they could to make sure that the protesters were able to exercise their right to free speech. It's a very delicate balancing act, because while we tried to make sure that they were protected from the cars and the other things that were going on, we also gave those who wished to destroy space to do that as well. And we worked very hard to keep that balance and to put ourselves in the best position to de-escalate, and that's what you saw this evening.
Holy cow. That room to destroy. And she calls that balance.
Yeah.
So destroy whose property? Is it balance for the people who own CVS Pharmacy or the people who own that liquor store?
Well, did you see the athletic sports supplier, which was a mom and pop shop, which is a pretty lucrative business. It looked like they had a pretty good business going.
Burned to the ground?
No, they just looted the thing, and just hundreds, almost thousands of empty shoe boxes, just from one end to the other.
Dale, here's what I think a lot of people are missing, and this is something that just was glaring to me. This is happening supposedly because of a racist police response in the city of Baltimore. And they blame years, decades of racism, and that's that's a code term for white racism.
Right. Yeah.
So white racist cops, right, have precipitated all of this. Well, I did some research earlier this morning when I got up. The first black mayor of the city of Baltimore was elected in 1987. This city has been solidly Democrat since the year I was born. Solidly liberal Democrat. 1967 is when Baltimore, the mayor's office went Democrat and has stayed that way. Okay, so you've got the first black mayor in 87. It's been Democrat since 1967. The first black police chief, which they call police commissioner, 1984. The present day police commissioner of the city of Baltimore Police Department is a black man, an African American man. The council president for the city of Baltimore is a black man. There are 15 people on the Baltimore City Council. 9 of them are African American. 63% of the population of Baltimore is African American. The President of the United States is African American. The Attorney General of the United States is an African American female now, and before her, it was an African American male. So the leadership in that state, in that city, to the highest levels, to the President of the United States. The Attorney General, by the way, is the chief law enforcement officer of the United States of America. It's a black female. So if they have been in charge since 1987, Democrat since 1967, had a black police chief since 1984, how is it that white racist police behavior is at fault here?
That is a good question.
You guys are, I'm looking at this and I'm going, wait a minute, you guys are in charge. You can't blame Whitey. White people, Caucasians, have not been in the driver's seat in Baltimore for almost 3 decades. This is their own leadership. And you know what? No one's ever responsible. They're not responsible for their own record. All we hear, now I will give some kudos where they're due. The President Obama came out and said, this is not demonstrating. This is not making a point. This is crime. It's rioting. It's looting. It's thievery. you know, good for him.
I think he even said they're not looting, they're stealing.
They're stealing, right? Yeah, exactly. So thank you, Mr. President, for calling it what it is.
Yeah.
But guess what? It is not a white, racist police environment that caused this in Baltimore.
Nope.
Because whites haven't been in charge there for a long time. So you please explain to me. You know, if I would say if there were Asians in charge for the last 30 years, we'd be blaming them, wouldn't we?
Sure.
You know, it's so easy to go off this same old tired Al Sharpton mantra of white privilege and white racist cops beating down poor black people. The majority of the city council of Baltimore is black. The majority of the population is black. And you look at I went on their website, the City of Baltimore website. It's a lot more pepper than salt. Let me tell you, you can't. You gotta look for the white guy.
So how could it be white supremacy?
Here's what really blows my mind: to even ask these questions in the minds of some is to be racist. And I don't. But that's a bunch of garbage. You know, shut up with that, because we can only be responsible. Hold those responsible those who are in charge, and the people in charge are not white racist cops.
Good point. Sam Siemens here today discussing the Baltimore situation. It's time for the news. We'll be right back. Might as well say it's 7:35. Beautiful sunrise out there. My goodness.
Yeah,
pretty.
it is. It's nice. It's very nice.
Anyway, I think what's going on, and going back to Baltimore situation, what happened in Ferguson, New York, and wherever it may be going on.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say it, folks. It's the example of the leadership we have right now.
Well, you know, it amazes me that any group of people would seek power. For example, you know, in the case of Baltimore, over the last few decades, African Americans have taken control of the government as far as the offices. You know, I'm not talking about martial law, obviously, but you know, have been elected to the highest points or offices of leadership in their city and around their state. And yet, this far into that leadership, they still want to bang on the old drum of the 1960s. You know, they're talking about the riot of Baltimore, 1968. It's 2015. It's not 1968. And when you are the one that this has happened on your watch, you know. Yeah, we can go back and talk about civil rights and
all of this has transpired since the election of 08.
This has been all your well before the election of 08, Dale. I would suggest to you that this began in 1967 when that particular party took over the city of Baltimore.
Yep.
The first black mayor was 1987. So it's like saying, well, yes, we've made these strides, we're in charge now, but we still want to have the convenient ability to turn around and blame white racist cops. Well, you lost that right when you took over. I mean, these people, let me tell you, the chief of police, the police commissioner, the city council, by the way, the chair of the city, you guess the color of the chairperson of the city council in Baltimore. He ain't our color. He's a black guy. The chair, he's like the lead guy of their city council, all right? So chief police, mayor, police commissioner, exactly. And that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. Who the people elected. God love them. God bless them.
Good leadership elected.
Hey, do your jobs. Do what you've been elected to do. But now, since you guys have been in charge, you know, my point was those people have the ability to hire, fire, promote, demote.
That's right.
So what you know, racist police climate are you talking about? You guys are the ones pulling the strings. You're calling the shots. So how can you turn around and blame some other narrative, some other system that's not even been in play for over 30 years in your city? You know, don't pee on my back and tell me it's raining. If you are the ones in charge, then you are responsible for the governing that you have been doing. So don't try to lay it at the feet of someone at some other race, some other group of people. It's your party, you know, your race, your leadership, your government. Why don't you own it instead of pulling an Al Sharpton, and blaming things of the crimes of 40 years ago? That's not the case right now in Baltimore.
What was the young man's name that died in the police custody?
Freddie Gray, I believe. And you know, we were discussing earlier that it's now come out on social media. Now, of course, you know, social media is you know, it's a mixed bag. So there are some media outlets that are starting to confirm it, from what I read briefly this morning. But it's now come out that Freddie Gray, the gentleman, the African-American guy who ran from the police, who fought the police, was doing so, you know, a couple of weeks out from having cervical spinal surgery. Now, all the doctors that I know would tell you after cervical spinal surgery, you need to be in bed or, you know, at home recuperating, not riding a bicycle in the bad part of town running from the police. So some of what may have happened to him, you know, this is another thing. Don't you know that if there was a smoking gun that went back to racist cops just beating the snot out of this guy in a jail cell, we would know by now? Don't you know that leadership in Baltimore could not wait to put that narrative out there? But guess what? You haven't heard Jack, and you know why? Because I would say, just like the Ferguson thing, the facts of the case are not lining up to support their false narrative. So now they have to come up with something else. And that, to me, is pretty, speaks very loudly and very plainly that we're going to find out that Mr. Gray is not dead today because a bunch of cops played trampoline on his neck.
I pulled up his arrest record. 3/2015, dealing coke.
Yeah.
Possession of narcotics, illegal gambling, possession of narcotics over 10 grams, manufacturing, distribution of narcotics. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It just.
He had heroin. He was selling heroin as well.
Stolen property.
He's also 14. Got weapons charges against him.
Distribution of narcotics again, stolen property. That goes back to 2008. Unlawful possession, 2 counts. Burglary.
Yeah.
Possession of narcotics, distribution. You know.
So this guy was not just your poor choir boy Eagle Scout that was on his way to church when this happened.
No.
He's had multiple contacts with the police. Now, that is not to indict him in this particular case. You know, each case has to be taken on its own merits, and you have to go with the facts of that case. Any police officer knows that. But at the same time, sometimes that's why police run criminal histories, to find out about the past of the person that they've charged. That's why detectives do that. If someone is named as a suspect in a crime, one of the first things that the CID guys do is go run his name and birthday to find out if he's got a rap sheet. And if he's crystal clean, they might think, you know, we're going to need some real hard evidence to look stronger at this guy. But if somebody says, hey, so-and-so stole my car, and this guy has 4 grand theft autos in his jacket, well, guess what? You might want to look at that guy. Once again, it's about being responsible for your own actions. And to say that
again?
Being responsible for your own actions, and to say that that this whole situation, that Mr. Gray's death, that none of it has to do with his own activity, his own decisions that day. He bears some of the brunt of what happened by being out there committing crimes in the first place, assuming that he would have been found
what happened
guilty.
in Ferguson, Missouri, and all of that. I mean,
yeah,
he strong-armed a store clerk. He was stealing stuff.
Yeah, strong-arm robbery. Yeah, he tossed that little clerk around like a rag doll. Yeah, so he was not just the gentle giant that just couldn't wait to go to college and so on and so forth. He was a thug, and it had and his thugdom had nothing to do with the color of his skin. It had to do with being a big bully that was used to, you know, running over other people to take what you wanted and violate other people's rights.
So what's the deal in the cities? I've lived in St. Louis. What's with New York? What's with Baltimore? What's with what's in our cities that's wrong?
Well, you know, I would say that a lot of it has to do with the way that I think that some of the elected leadership has been governing lately, instead of doing what's right and governing from the point of, you know, taking into account the facts of a particular case. What we see now are politicians that, you know, stick their finger in their mouth and hold their finger to the wind to see which direction the winds of politics and change are blowing, and then they go out and make decisions instead of standing behind the officers who are doing their jobs. So I think, but that's partly to blame. And also, I mean, once again, as we've clearly pointed out in this show today, police officers in some of the bigger cities are battling an image that in many cases, like Baltimore, doesn't exist. That you know, that it's white, racist, whitey cop that's out there just abusing black folks, when the fact is that African Americans are indeed in charge in those areas. So if you have in Baltimore, if you have white racist cops, guess what? That's your fault.
Mm-hmm.
You police them. You're the mayor. You're the city council persons. You're the council chair. You know, you are the attorney general. You are the president. Do something about it. You cannot tell me that these people in this community of Baltimore have just laid back for the last 30 years while the mean old racist cops abuse them day in and day out. I just don't buy that at all. When you look at those videos of those rioters, the police supervisors are wearing white shirts, and a majority of them are black. Black officers, lieutenants, captains that are out there supervising this. The situation in New York where the guy resisted arrest, that was overseen by a black female sergeant. You didn't hear anything about it. The supervisor on the scene was a black police officer. It wasn't a white guy.
And why did they close the schools? Wouldn't the kids have been safer in the schools? I mean, providing they could get there safely?
Well, I think that's the issue, provided that they could get there safely. I think that they probably don't want the kids on the street at all right now because it's been a powder keg.
Wasn't most of those protesters high school kids in that age range?
Well, it seems in that one particular area where this began around the, what was it, Minois Mall or something like that. I don't remember the name of it.
No, they said it was West Baltimore. Let's see if I can pull up a quick map before we go to break. And
I do know that some of that a lot of the violence began after 3 p.m. when the kids were out of school, and some youngster tweeted, "Hey, we're gonna have a rally at the Minois Mall or something like that," and then that bled out into the streets because they turned them away from the mall, and then you saw what else happened. So a lot of it, was. But when they say, the children, I mean, I heard one CNN reporter talk about that police had tackled a child. Well, this child was about 17 years old and looked to be about 6'3" and probably went 200 pounds. That's not my idea of a child. He may be a child in his mind, but physically he's capable of doing great harm. And so these were young adults, in my view, high school kids that were rioting out there on the streets of Baltimore a couple of days ago.
We better take a quick break. More with Sam Siemens right after this. 7:51 on a beautiful Wednesday morning. Sam Siemens and I are discussing the Baltimore situation, and it's sad to see our cities, because I really have thought over the last, before 2008, I thought, we've come so far. Yeah, I remember the 60s. I remember, I can remember things going on because I was in St. Louis area at the time, and actually my dad had to travel from Illinois to Missouri every day, and he had to go through East St. Louis, Illinois.
Sure.
That's not the friendliest town in the world.
Well, have you noticed that where all these powder kegs in our nation are happening are cities that are governed and controlled by non-conservative, non-Republican leadership. Now, I'm not trying to make this a party problem. I'm really not. But I am responding.
Because they want the handouts.
But I am responding to the false narrative that they put out. Once again, this thing about, I'm not pitting blacks against whites or whites against blacks in the Baltimore situation, but I am responding to the narrative that we hear the African-American leaders in Baltimore say, these guys in suits that are attorneys and pastors. I'm a pastor myself. I value the truth. I mean, the truth sets you free. But now when these people get in charge and things fail and leadership fails and things break down, why do you still want to blame the people that are no longer in charge and haven't been in charge for 30 years? That to me is a bunch of baloney, and they need to be called out on that, in my opinion. For whatever that's worth. No one's called and asked me, but I'm just tired of that same worn out old thing when, if you're in charge of something, buddy, you own it.
Well, it's like I sat down with Herman Cain several years ago. We were in North Little Rock one time, in Washington, D.C. another. And it was the time during the BP oil spill. And I said, if you were in the Oval Office, I said, you're an African-American Republican.
Yeah.
And you were getting all this criticism, what would you do? And he looked at me and he said, son, and I mean, to have Herman Cain, this big, massive man, say, son, I don't know, but this is where it comes into play. You have to have your top advisors come in, and you have to have an analysis, a quick, thorough analysis of the situation, whether you're an oil spill, a riot in Baltimore, a shooting in Ferguson, Missouri. And he says, you've got to have your top people give you the best advice on how to do the repair quickly. The president does not have a toolbox in the Oval Office, say, kit to fix the oil spill or the kit to fix the Baltimore riot. There's no quick fix.
Well, because all of those posts
are leadership. Like Herman Cain said, you've got to have good people.
All of those posts have been awarded out of political expediency. I mean, it's not about what's in their jacket or in their file, but a lot of it has to do with their party or their race or whatnot. That's just a climate that they've created. I mean, for example, leaders have to be accountable for their decision making. For example, let's take it to the local level. If there was a problem with the Mountain Home Police Department, you know our police chief as well as I do. Corey Emanuel has been the police chief here for some time. If our officers were violating people's rights or doing something that was against the law, the first guy to be called on the carpet by the mayor or maybe even the governor is going to be the chief of police. What are you doing to respond to this? He would have to own that. Now, can you imagine if we had officers violating people's rights and they went to Corey Emanuel, the chief, and said, hey, Corey, your officers are doing this. This is against Arkansas state law. What do you have to say? If Corey said, well, the chief that was around here in 1967 created this climate, we wouldn't buy that for a second.
No.
He'd be out on his ear. He would be responsible for what his officers are doing.
Yep.
But yet, you translate that to a bigger city of Baltimore, and that's not the case. Nobody's holding the mayor accountable. Nobody's holding the police commissioner in chief accountable, or their city council.
And you got a mayor that, we're going to give them the room to do the destruction they want to do, basically is what she said. I mean, Hannity just picked up on it, too.
Yeah, I mean, we've got to give people room to break the law, to express themselves. Are you kidding? I mean, what a total breakdown.
That's not First Amendment.
Of everything that this country has stood for.
Burning police
for
cars,
over 200
cars, CVS pharmacy burns.
That's liquor stores.
That's not freedom of speech. Folks.
No.
That's just being a thug and being a...
And here's the real sad part about it. People are watching this on the television, and it is feeding into those old, dead, tired stereotypes.
Yeah.
And you can across this country, you can see people saying, "Well, yeah, we always knew it was going to be that way," and that's the saddest part.
Mm-hmm. And the younger people picking up, "Hey, look what's going on there. We could do it." Yeah. Let's keep in Cleveland or Chicago or some of these other.
But I know in my heart of hearts that there are some good people in Baltimore of every color that are trying to do good things.
Yeah.
But the leadership has to be responsible at the end of the day.
Thanks, Sam Siemens, for being here. We've got the Rush Morning Update followed by Glenn Beck. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a great day, everybody.